Good evening, fellow Wakefield citizens. I'm Dan Sherman, Chairman of the Finance Committee. With me this evening is Steve Mayo, our Town Administrator, and Kim Smith, the Superintendent of Schools. We're here to talk about the Wakefield financial condition, a little preview of what's going to be coming up at town meeting Monday evening. We're going to go through, I have an agenda of items in terms of our past, what's been happening in our recent past, our account values, what we're planning on, what we've been spending. We'll talk a little bit about the present and the current budget that's being proposed for your consideration Monday evening. And then a little bit on the future. I do a forecast what's going to happen in the coming 10 years at my best estimate. I believe this may be our 15th time we've actually done this presentation, so I hope that everybody's not too bored with it just yet. So with that, I think I'll go ahead and get started. So on our receipts, this is a graph that shows what we've been receiving for income from various categories. And the tax levy is the bottom set of values going from 1990 to 2017. And it is the largest portion of our revenue for the town. It is the most stable portion of the revenue. You can see from this chart that other values have a tendency to increase and decrease over time, but the tax levy, our property taxes, stays extremely steady, moving forward each year with a nice increase that helps us to budget and fund all the operations and repair work that we need to do for the town. You'll also notice that over the years from 1990, we were at roughly $32 million, and now we're closing in on $90 million in terms of our revenue. The next bar up is state aid, which has been jumping around a bit over the years. Local receipts is the next bar, and then there's a catch-all of all other that we receive for other income that we can use to pay salaries and so forth. Over the past 28 years, our total revenue has increased an average of 3.75% per year. Over the last 5 years, we've actually had a better run. It's been increasing of 4.4%, principally by new growth. As everybody in town is aware, there's a lot of construction going on in town. We've had a number of projects that come in, for example, the head of the lake. We've had some utility work that's brought in some revenue, and that has helped us out substantially over the last 5 years. And as some of you may recall, not that many years ago, we had a really tough period of time on our budget and our revenue because of the 2008 financial crisis and other problems, and we've been fortunate to have some good construction projects in town that's helped us out. Looking at the receipts in another fashion, in terms of as a percentage of total, the tax levy by and large has been the most consistent and the largest portion. It's been a little less than 70% back in 1990 to the point now it's about 75% of our total revenue. And because it's so steady, that's really helped us out in the sense of we're not relying on state aid as much as other communities. There are communities out there that are 50% revenue based for state aid. And when the state cuts back, it becomes very painful for those communities that rely on the state that much. We would like to get more state aid, and Steve's going to talk about that here in a moment. But the fact that it's not a large portion of our budget has actually helped us and kept things really steady, kept the ship upright in a steady state. The dark green line is the local receipts. That has an increased amount, principally by the meals and hotel revenue that we receive and the tax increases there. That's helped us out, and we've increased our fees to try to get more in line with other communities and our peers, and that's helped us out as well. So that's gone from about 7 or 8% of our total budget, or to our revenue, to about 10%. And then finally, it's the all other. And these are things that come in that we just don't expect. Ad hoc items, things like if we sell a school or if we sell another piece of property, we get some additional income off of that.
But before we go from the slide, I just wanted to chime in. If you look at the, I'm kind of colorblind. What would you call that, pink or purplish line? The pinker person, the state aid line, pink, reddish, purple. It's the third line up from the bottom. You notice in 2002, state aid accounted for 20% of our revenues, okay? Right now, that line has steadily declined downward, and it's hitting 10% of our revenues. And it is a dual-edged sword, as Dan said. We would love to get more state aid. Frankly, I feel that Wakefield does not get its fair amount of state aid. If we got the same, whether it's education or we don't get enough for roads, education, or from some other issues, and I'll go after that, back that in a second, but we have been self-sustaining. So the good thing is that we are able to handle our own budget with our own revenues coming in, whether that's tax receipts or other receipts in town. And Dan talked about, some of the cities that have a lot of state aid. Think of a city like Lawrence or Lynn or something like that, where 50% or more of running their town comes from the state. And the state cuts that 50% by 10%, which can happen. The state can cut everybody 10%. They're in a world of hurt because a big percentage of their budget is hurt. For us, believe me, it's painful, and we have to make decisions, but it's not as catastrophic as it could be. So it's good and it's bad. But we've done a good job of kind of maintaining it on our own. And I don't know, maybe if Dr. Smith wants to talk a little bit about how that affects the schools, this might be a good time to jump in, or if that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to talk about it a little bit when we talk about the school department budget, but this year in special education, and our circuit breaker funding that comes in from the state, the state's obligation is to provide 75% reimbursement. We received 65%, which was a deficit of about $210,000, which was really unexpected for the school department. It really kind of drives a lot of what you'll hear tonight from me, both in FY18 and in FY19. Chapter 70 funding, which is the money that comes in for education from the state. Wakefield has been long underfunded based on the funding formula, and it's unfortunate. There's been a lot of advocating from our legislators, but at this point, we're still, while we've made gains, we still really, the formula does not really favor our community. So really that's how it affects the school department budget.
Thank you. One of the items, important items, is local receipts. That's averaging anywhere between $7.5 million per year. We're up to, I guess, the last 2 years, for fiscal years 16 and 17, as you see from this chart, we're in a 7.5% range. The biggest element for local receipts is a motor vehicle excise tax, and you'll see a significant drop. If you look at 2007, 2008, and then 2010, it dropped. And this is directly related to the financial crisis of 2008. People stopped buying those new cars, and it hurt us on the excise tax. So you can see a decrease there. As the economy picked up, the motor vehicle excise taxes continued to increase, and increased by a significant amount. You can also see, starting in 2011, the next bar up from the bottom is the hotels and meals tax, and you see how that increased significantly. We get, I think, around $800 to $1,000 per year on the hotels and restaurant meals taxes, so that's helped us out substantially. The other one that's helped us out is licenses and permits. Those have helped us out. Those have increased, and I think you'll see some of the fees and permits amounts increase. The miscellaneous at the top is when we have something special happen, like a sale of a piece of property or land, or other events that are unforeseen. The question that we always have, and the little back and forth that I have with Steve, is how much are we going to get for local receipts next year? The DOR, Department of Revenue at the state of Massachusetts, has limits on what we can count as local receipts. So they'll say you have to use a lower number. They're quite conservative. and Steve and Kevin, our town accountant, follow that. I look at this kind of a chart and say, okay, we're going to be more than 6 million. We've been over 7 million for a few years. I expect it's going to be over 7 million. But either way, we have free cash to handle whatever the actual amount turns out to be. But you'll see that kind of a difference occasionally where my figure is higher than Steve and Kevin's, and that's why, because Department of Revenue requirements and conservatism.
I've been called Chicken Little over this, over the years, just want you to know.
I wouldn't say that.
Yeah, no, you wouldn't. But I think we are very pleasantly surprised
Yeah,
when the receipts are higher. So
yes.
at the end of the day, we do agree, where the numbers are going to be. To talk about hotel meals and hotel and meals taxes, when someone comes in and stays in a hotel, if you've gone and stayed in a hotel, you pay a hotel tax. A lot of that, a portion of that goes to the city or town that you're in. That has actually been growing, the hotel taxes in Wakefield with the 2 hotels that we have. That last fiscal year, $600,000 was brought in on just the hotel taxes. That's a real lift to us. The other big lift to us has been the local meals tax, which everybody has, and I think it's 0.75%. When the Department of Revenue estimated 7 or 8 years ago what Wakefield would bring in on the meals tax, they said 135,000. Last year, we brought in over 280,000. And when you think about it, all the restaurants that are downtown, that are opening up, we have new ones opening up every day, and they seem to all be pretty busy. That's a big boost to the community as well, and has helped us kind of weather some of these other storms.
Back to state aid. So this chart just looks at the absolute dollars that we receive from state aid. So there's not inflation adjusted. These are all absolute dollars. And you can see that we were getting, back in 1990, a little bit less than $7 million, and it dropped down. I think that was the dot-com bust. That was 2002, and that's when that. I'm not sure what the situation was back in 1991.
Housing bubble, maybe a housing bubble.
Maybe that's what, the housing bubble back then. So then they got up to the point where we're over $10 million. So then the dot-com bust hit in 2001, 2002. And our aid dropped, continued to drop all the way down to 2011, and then now it's slowly starting to increase. But it's still, at less than $10 million, less than it was, 17 years ago. Yeah. So it has not kept up with inflation, certainly, and it's been a little frustrating, as we just heard a few minutes ago, about the fact that the state hasn't been following up on its part of the grand bargain.
And what's really frustrating on the Chapter 70 is the main state fund for education. And if you were to look at similar communities, and this is what I do when I talk to our reps and we go in front of the State House to talk about what's happening with Chapter 70, why isn't Wakefield getting its fair share? And some people say, well, Reading has more students than Wakefield has, so Reading gets more dollars in state aid. I can certainly agree with that. More students, they get more money. But let's look at what it is per pupil. We should get the same per pupil that Reading gets, that Melrose gets. We're very similar communities. What's happening right now is we're getting less per pupil. So much less to the point that if we were getting the same per pupil as Reading was getting, we'd be getting almost $3 million more from the state for education funding. For Melrose, probably $1.5 million more. Now those numbers aren't as large as they were a few years ago, so it's shrinking, but it's still not, it's not fair to the people of Wakefield, and I challenge our reps and Senator to make us whole, to bring us up to those areas. And I get it's tough for them because other communities, they don't want to give anything away. And I'm saying don't give anything away, just move us up and maybe hold them in the same area. Doesn't make me all that popular with some of the other area superintendents, but I don't really care. I only care about one superintendent. That's ours. But that's a big part of it. And Dr. Smith talked about the circuit breaker rate, which helps with special ed. That has been funded at 75% once in the last 10 years, I think. And if you look at that, that's probably $2 million of money that this community of Wakefield, which has been very, very pro-education, and these children deserve the services that we've put up as a community that the state has actually shirked its responsibility of. I'm happy to report that hopefully this year we may get a supplement in that area, and next year I'm hearing that the state is going to fully fund that at 75% of the cost of special ed. That'll be huge for this community. You know, a couple extra $100,000 goes a long way in helping us handle our budget. So when you look at this graph, and we look at it every year, and you know, if we adjusted it for inflation, it would be we would really be see how much less we're getting from the state. But you know, I think with the help of the finance committee, town meeting members, the town council, the school committee, we have certainly tried to do the best bang for our buck that we could with that local
I'll
aid.
believe that money when I see it.
Yeah, I know. Well, we always when it's cleared, the check is cleared, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that's a little bit on the revenue side. So now I want to talk a little bit about what we have in our accounts, if you will, our savings account and our checking account. So we have a stabilization fund, which it describes it quite well. The name is fitting. It's you know, money that we've set aside that we can use in case of difficult times. And so the balance of that fund is roughly $3 million, which is the dashed line, purple, I think, on your screen. And it's at $3 million. It represents a little over 3.5% of our total revenue and our spend. As a percentage of our budget, it's been pretty steady at just a little bit less than 3% of the total amount that we spend. But it's an area that we want to maintain at least a 3% level, or maybe creep it up a little bit. But somewhere where it is right now is a comfortable spot. The Finance Committee and, at the time, the Board of Selectmen put together a policy. And our policy was, let's try to have our cash and our reserves at roughly 10% of our revenue and our spend. And the stabilization fund is at 3%. And so it's in a good, healthy spot. The other account that we have is called free cash. It is free because it's not encumbered by any other project or anything we have to spend it on. It is our checking account that we can use and tap for whatever project town meeting sees fit. And for many years, our free cash was quite low. You can see that from 1994 all the way to about 2010, our free cash was actually quite low, and too low. It was roughly at 2% of our budget. So if you think about the 2% plus the stabilization at 3%, we were only at 5% total, and we'd rather be up closer to 10%. So over the last 6 years, we've managed to get our free cash up to where it belongs. We've not spent the money. We've accumulated some good revenue, as I discussed a little earlier, and we've kept our spending habits somewhat in check. So now we're at a point that as a percentage of our budget, it's almost 10%, and the balance is close to $9.7 million. There's a footnote here that these are all July 1 numbers, and we have, from time to time, spent some of that free cash at the fall town meeting. And this past fall, we spent $2.4 million on, I think there's some contracts, there was the various
And really
projects.
just to balance the budget, too.
Yeah, it had to balance the budget. So basically, we spent some of that money. So right now, we're down about $2.5 million. So that will give us somewhere in the 7% range as a percent of budget. So considering our stabilization at 3%, 7% for free cash as of today, gets us our 10% reserves that we're trying to maintain. Our debt service fund. So this is a special fund that we use for paying projects when we borrow money. For example, the recreation bond. We did our fields. We've done Dolbear, Woodville. We did the library many years ago now. More recently, we've got
Senior center.
Senior centers in there. I mentioned public safety.
Public safety.
And we've got some projects coming up. And the fire truck. The ladder truck is in there.
Ladder truck is in there. Pumper's in there.
Galvin is in there.
Walton?
Walton is in there. Or
Walton is in there.
Will be in there.
Will be in there. Yeah, Walton will be in. So basically, this is a fund that we use to mitigate and manage our debt. So we've got these bonds that are outstanding. And I'll talk a little bit more about some of those projects that are coming off of this line. But the debt service fund has been maintained at roughly, $500,000 to $1 million for a number of years. It hasn't accumulated to like the $4 million level. I think when it dropped, we made some purchases of some land that had the lake, Molten Playground area, I think was part of that. And then there's been a few purchases. But right now we're using it as basically a stabilization and a means for helping us budget these large projects that need bonding.
And bonding is just a fancy word for a mortgage.
Yes.
So basically, when you buy a house, you can't, well, most people can't just put down cash and do it. If you put an addition on, you're probably getting a mortgage, redoing your mortgage or an equity line, and that's what these are. These are mortgages for the town. And when Dan talked about the reserves that we have, the 10% reserves, when we go out and borrow the money as a town, the fact that we have those reserves in place and have a policy meant that we got a lower interest rate. Because what happens is you go out, we basically go out to bid, and they say to what is our credit score as the town of Wakefield? And our credit score is very, very, very good.
AAA.
AAA, the highest bond rating we can get. So we were borrowing years ago at 1%, 2% in that price range. Now rates have ticked up a little bit nationally, but we should still be in that lower echelon as we go forward for some other projects. So
Right.
all of these things, they do come together as we go forward.
Yeah, when the rating agencies look at our books,
Yeah.
and they look at our reserves, they also look at our revenue stream, our expected revenue stream. They also look at what have we done with OPEB.
Exactly.
One of the things, it wasn't that many years ago, we were not AAA.
Right.
And they will cite various things that we've done to improve our financial condition, and hence they moved us up to a AAA, which is the top status. The next chart is our capital, how we spend our capital. So we talked about the debt service fund, and you see a lot of squiggly lines here, but what's important is in terms of the dollars that we spend is the pink or the red line. Right now, we're up around $2 million, and it represents roughly 3% of our total spend. So the $2 million is a nice spot. I mean, we were as low as $350,000 on spending on capital. And by capital, I'm talking about buildings, sidewalks, roads, the things that you see are infrastructure. So our spend on infrastructure just wasn't where it needed to be until recently. We're up just over $2 million now. That'll slowly increase with time, but it's up to a spot where we can actually handle a number of projects like we should. As a percentage of the total spend, I mentioned it's gotten up to 2%. The two lines above, the blue and the, I guess, light blue, is if you take the total capital spend and then you add to it what we spend on our bonds. So with our bond payments, we're up to around just over $5 million is what we spend. And that represents about 5% of our total budget. And that's a figure that we need to maintain. Actually, I wouldn't mind increasing a little bit, because we do have a lot of issues, and we'll talk about roads and sidewalks, for example, being on those issues, and also the building we're in, the high school, as everybody I think is aware, it needs some work. And so we have a number of projects that we need to address. So I expect that those lines will all increase a little bit in the coming years. I also look at just the large budgets. There's a few budgets that kind of stand out that are not department budgets, and healthcare is a big one. Obviously, that's the first one at the top. That one was, as you can see, escalating at an incredibly fast rate. From 1998, it was just barely over $3 million, and then next thing you know, in just a few years, 12, 13 years later, it's up 12 million, an unbelievable increase. And that was extremely painful for the town. And so we made a number of changes. One of the changes, we went to the GIC off of, we used to be with Maya. That saved us a lot of money, several million dollars. And because of that savings, we were then able to start putting money aside for post-retirement medical benefits. one of the things that is new in the accounting world is we have to recognize the liability, like pension plans. We have a post-retirement medical plan for our employees and retirees, and we've set up an account, and we're putting aside about $1.6 million into that account. So the savings that we saw back in 2011 was enough to decrease that budget and start putting money aside into a trust fund for post-employment benefits. It's been increasing a little bit at a time going forward, but it's in a much more manageable level than it was 15 years ago. The second line is the retirement budget. That's been increasing pretty steadily over the years, roughly at 4.3% per year. And then the Northeast Voc, and that includes also the Lexington, but most of our money goes to the vocational school up the hill here, and that's been going up at about roughly at 5.4% per year. But the fact that the 10-year average for the healthcare account has only been going up 2.2% on average has been a real plus to us. So next slide gets into the personal services budgets, and the top line is the schools. So with that, I'm going to turn the microphone over to our superintendent to talk about the school budget.
Absolutely. Well, in the last 5 years, the Wakefield Public Schools have really made some gains, and really two significant things have happened in the last 5 years. One is the community's financial investment in the schools, and the other is a really strong strategic action plan. And I think those two things together have really made a difference. And a lot of people have been asking me, have the investments we've made over these last few years, are they making a difference? And the answer is yes. And I brought a few data points which I think are pretty exciting. Some highlights of what our students have achieved on the state assessment, the most recent one. Our 7th graders at this past assessment scored the 3rd highest growth percentile in the Middlesex League, which has 12 school districts, only behind Winchester and Lexington. It's very impressive. Wakefield Memorial High School achieved a level 1 accountability rating. That's the 4th school in Wakefield to achieve that just in the last 2 years. So we have 4 of 6 are considered level 1 schools, which is a very top echelon. The other 2 are level 2, which is considered very respectable. Wakefield High School joins Lexington, Winchester, Melrose, and Arlington as the only level 1 high schools in the 12-member league. And Wakefield Memorial High School scored the 2nd highest performance level and the 3rd highest growth percentile in the entire 12-member Middlesex League. So really in the last 5 years, there's been a real surge in our performance, really kind of showing that some of these investments have truly made a difference. We're really pleased about that. So coming into FY19, our budget, really this year is reflected in 3 major budget areas. We have our personnel costs. It's a little bit over 80% of our budget is in personnel. Our operational costs. And then the other significant portion this year, we've talked a little bit about special education, has to do with our special education out-of-district tuitions. That area is a very unpredictable area, and as we said, with the state not meeting its legal funding obligation at 75% and us only receiving 65%, that really just becomes a significant factor in this year's budget. So in regard to those 3 budget buckets, if you will, in personnel, this year our increase from FY18 is 3.91%. That's a combination of contractual obligations, stipends, new and removed positions, and anticipated retirements. In regard to our operational costs, the increase from FY18 is 0.21%. We were really able to balance things out. Many of our areas we were able to level fund or even reduce a little bit so that we could put a little bit extra into our contracted services for students to support individual needs and also to kind of enhance some of our instructional supplies and technology. And then again, that third kind of big bucket, the special education out-of-district tuition, you know, we have 3,500 students approximately in the Wakefield Public Schools, and 41 of them attend out-of-district schools for their special education needs. That's about 1.16% of our student body. That's comparatively low in the region. So we do quite well keeping kids in district, but there are some children that need services beyond what a public school system can provide. These children attend 25 different school placements for a range of disabilities. And the cost of those out-of-district schools is $4.254 million. So it's a large cost in our budget this year. As we said, we received 65% funding from the state this year, so we received $210,000 less than expected in FY18. So it's really been a tricky year. In addition to that, we had 11 unanticipated student placements since the FY18 budget was approved. Why is this narrative important? Well, because those changes and the students that have moved in or have been placed in out-of-district placements since that time, that translates to about $500,000 going into the FY19 budget, which has to be accounted for. So by putting that $500,000 in the budget next year, that increases our budget in that special ed area by 1.42%. So kind of the summary in terms of the increase in the budget, personnel and operations together, our increase is 4.11%, and then the special education increase for out-of-district tuitions is 1.42%, for a net total of 5.54% increase over FY18. So it's just kind of the summary, kind of the highlights of what's in this budget. This budget increases some specialized personnel to provide reading intervention support to students. It increases our nursing staff to meet some really growing health needs of children. It continues our strategic focus on curriculum and really strengthening our K-12 library media centers across the district. Really values the arts as an integral experience for children. It does implement phase 2 of a reduction of extracurricular activity fees in partnership with the town. In FY17, it cost $275 per student per activity to participate in after-school sports or music or theater. And in FY19, I'm very pleased to say that we're really helping families by reducing that to $175. So it's down $100 over the 2-year period. So really appreciative of the partnership with the town in that. So that's really kind of some of the highlights of what are in the budget. We will also be, there's an article for the Stabilization Fund, and the school department will be looking to supplement our FY18 budget due to that $210,000 deficit with the special education stabilization account, and we'll be looking to transfer $175,000 to make ends meet in FY18, and that's why that account is there, is to stabilize those years where it's unpredictable or volatile, or we don't receive the funding we need, or some combination of those things. We haven't had to draw from it in a few years, but we will be asking to do that this year. And that's really kind of the overview.
Thank you. So continuing on the personal services budget on the screen, this looks from fiscal year 13 through fiscal year 18. And by personal services, basically it's wages that are paid to the staff at various departments. So you get the schools, fire, library, police, DPW, general government, human services, and then a total. So over the last 5 years, the average payroll that we've had increase has been roughly 5.7%. In normal years, we couldn't sustain that. That is an area that until recently, there's no way you could have 5.7% increases from year to year based on the revenue. But as I mentioned at the beginning of the program, our revenue has increased substantially because of the new growth and some good things that have been done in the last 6 or 7 years that's allowed us to get our salaries basically to get up amongst peers. In certain areas, we know that our pay levels were too low. I think about the schools as being one of those. We are near the bottom of the Middlesex League for teacher pay. And so we've made adjustments to get all these amounts back up to where they should be.
I think the other part of that is also that in a lot of these instances, there were additional services added.
Oh,
for
absolutely.
instance, in the
Yes.
fire department, we brought back not only keeping 2 fire stations open, which is very important to make sure that we service the whole community, but we also brought back the fire prevention officer, which was cut for a period of time when, remember those years when things were bad and things were low, sacrifices were made. So having someone that prevents items from happening and reviews plans and does stuff like that, that's very important to have that in the fire department. Also more of a emphasis on emergency management, which is a huge issue today.
Library, we added
The library we added
Sunday hours. And those are extremely popular.
It's the most popular day.
Yeah.
My dad loves it. He goes to the library every Sunday, I think. Police, we use the word mission specific when you think about the world today. We have school resource officers at the middle school, the high school, and the vocational school up the hill to deal with the issues that are happening in the schools today. We also have a officer that really focuses on families and some domestic issues, mental health issues that we have in town. We have officers that are all trained of how to really work in this environment today with a lot of the mental health issues that they have. We call it our counselor and training program, where officers are trained to work with some of the people in town. Very important. DPW doing a lot more with stormwater management. In fact, that was put into the budget. General government is just the people at town hall that run things.
We've also added people to DPW
We have.
because of the needs.
Because of the needs. We went down, and the DPW directors say, well, there still aren't enough to be added. He's still below. In human services, which is a small amount, so the percentage, when you add something, the percentage jumps up. There's more that we're doing for veterans. There's more that we're doing in recreation for all ages. So those, we added back services, and we did have to make sure that we were paying our people competitive wages.
Yep. Next is the budgets in total. So you can see for each of the same major departments, if you take the personal services, you add into the contractual services, things like heat and light and mechanical, and everything else that goes into a budget. This just shows where we've been for the last 5 years. And it was a big push, as many of you recall, a couple of years ago, we gave the schools over an 11% increase. So that one jumped up by the 6.4 over the 5-year period. But basically, we're trying to right-size the schools, and I think we've accomplished that. The fire budget had some big increases, again, because of personnel, for the most part. The library, we talked about the additional hours. And the other thing about the library is we've been able to get to the point where we don't need special dispensation, if you will, from the state. We are fully accredited, and we are spending enough money on books and materials such that we no longer need an exemption. So many years we're getting exemption, and for fiscal year 19, we'll be fully funding that books and materials budget. As Steve mentioned, the police, we've added staff and expanded their DPWs also. And actually, I like the fact that general government, and I think sometimes the general government is being overhead, but it's really not, but it's, in a sense it is only going up at 3.2%.
That's where I fall in, right in that category.
That's where Steve is. But overall, we've averaged about a 5.8% increase in our department budgets.
A couple of other items that are in there that have really increased in cost, and when you think about both police and fire, Narcan.
Oh, yeah.
Narcan cost has skyrocketed, and it's used more often than anybody would really like to think about in today's world. That's a cost. In the police department, we're also using tasers. They're all trained on tasers, and that's very important because we don't have the issue like we had in one of our neighboring communities where someone running away was actually shot and killed. We'll do it a little bit differently. I think it's says a little bit more about the how we're handling the community. In the DPW budget, which has a big increase this year, we actually, and when we get to capital, I'll expand on it. We put some items that we have been calling capital for years that really aren't capital. Items like painting and some maintenance. That's not capital. That's not really improving, things. It's just kind of maintaining it. So that had a little bit of a jump in there.
Yeah, for the next go-around.
For the next go-around.
Yeah. So looking at various budget priorities, so at our top is public safety, our infrastructure. We mentioned a little bit of drainage. Business development, it's helped us a lot in the last 2 years, and we want to maintain that. And, in the Main Streets project and so forth is a great example. Social programs, we mentioned the veterans, is something we're going to keep focus on. Obviously, education. Buildings, we're really concerned, and we have been for years, in terms of making sure we keep the roofs watertight, for example. We need to maintain our buildings less. It costs us a whole lot more down the road. And finally, we just need to keep an eye on our reserves and not get carried away with spending too much and leave ourselves in a dark spot. So again, looking at fiscal year 19, our reserves are in good shape. We're at 10% of our budget. We have enhanced services. We just described some of those. We have capital projects that total over $59 million over the next 5 years. And there's no way we can even take, one-fifth of that, $12 million and spend on this year. We're doing $2 million. But in thinking about the budget and what we have to do, we look forward and we think about the projects that are down the road. And we've been kicking some projects down the road. We're kicking the can, so to speak. But we need to keep that in mind as we put together our budget. As I mentioned earlier, we've had a nice lift in the hotel and meals taxes. This year, we got a little too much snow and ice, and we're looking at an overdraft of roughly $600,000 to pay for this year's storms. And we've also been focusing on the public safety building, and one of the articles in this year's warrant concerns the public safety building that we'll hear a whole lot more about on probably Monday, if not the following Monday. So given that, we also looked at things like our outstanding debt. I talked about our mortgage and what we owe. So we still owe roughly $45 million on our mortgages. Dobear, Woodville, Public Safety, Senior Recreation, Public Land, Galvin, and Walton, and there's others. A ladder truck, for example, some smaller stuff. So we still have that as our debt to deal with. Our unfunded liability for retirement is at $63 million. We're on a funding schedule. We're paying that off. Our expectation is the unfunded liability will disappear by 2035. Knock on wood, that actually happens. We're paying it off, but we owe $63 million on retirement. On an OPEB, which is the post-employment benefits, basically retiree medical, we have an unfunded liability of roughly $79 million that we owe on retiree medical. And if you add it all up, our debt is roughly $200 million, which represents twice what we're going to spend in terms of revenue and spending for this coming year. So we do have some liabilities that we need to be cognizant of and be aware of and be careful of.
Right, and I just want to say that you hear those numbers and people get a little nervous, and I get a little nervous too when I hear them every time.
That's a big number.
It's a big number. But on the retirement fund and on the OPEB fund, that is pervasive among most cities and towns, if not all of them. We're one of the few that's really working on OPEB. It's increasing. We were one of the first ones out of the gate, though, I think, to really look at that.
There's just a handful. We were amongst the earlier ones, yeah.
And retirement is, I think that we're probably upper.
We're in the middle of the pack.
Middle of the pack. So
we actually have a couple of systems. I actually work in a couple of systems that are going to have reached full funding.
Oh, wow, great. Great. So, but that's not atypical. So I don't want you people to be.
If that number was a scary number, we would not have our AAA bond
exactly.
rating. If the Moody's and the S&P and so forth were concerned about the amount of debt that we had, we would not have a AAA rating. So you could take comfort
It's a better way to put it.
Revenue. So this is basically all projections. We're trying to figure out what we're going to have for revenue and our expectations. We expect on a tax increase roughly $2.7 million, or a 4% increase, to almost $71 million will come from property taxes. We're assuming about $1 million in new growth. And the $1 million has been relatively consistent over the last few years in that neighborhood. But it's all the projects that are out there. We look at what building permits have been issued. We see what's expected to come through. We keep an eye on all of those things, and we get pretty good. Actually, we come up pretty well on our expectations for new growth. We've been able to hit that one pretty well. We actually have technically a decrease in state aid of $73,000. If you look all in, we hope that turns into an increase in the coming weeks and months, but we'll see. So basically, consider it a flat for a state aid. As I mentioned before, I'm a little more optimistic than Steve is on local receipts. Based on the recent past, I'm projecting 8.2. I think you're at 6.7?
6.6, yeah.
6.6 million. It'll probably come in somewhere in between. We'll see. If it exceeds 8.2, Steve owes me dinner.
Happy to pay it.
We expect to use 1.45 million of our free cash to balance the budget. That's the expectation. We do receive money from our light department. This year, for fiscal year 19, we're expecting $891,000. We're going to have available funds. These are separate accounts that we can tap, and we expect to pull about $233,000 from that. The school building administration owes us some money. $928,000 is what they expect to give us. And that's Dolbear, Woodville.
That's it?
Just those two.
Just those two.
The Galvin, we actually runs a little differently. The SBA paid a portion of the bills, and so they don't pay us anything. We have a debt exclusion for the Galvin that the taxpayers had approved a few years ago. And I must say, I still love driving by that building. It's just beautiful. It's great that we have that. So we have that at $2.4 million. So our total revenues all in is at $95 million. Our expenses. So this is where we expect to spend the money. General government at $2.4 million. Public safety is $11.5. Human services, $800,000. Public works at $6.5. Schools at $40.1. The library at 1.6, vocational schools 1.2, unclassified 1.7, and benefits, primarily retirement and post-retirement medical, is at $16.6 million. The unclassified includes things like Medicare, street lights, the odds and ends that we pay
Insurance.
for. Yeah, insurance, things that don't fit into a nice, easy bucket, hence unclassified. So $82.4 million there. Then we also have a series of articles that'll be before town meeting. Capital, I mentioned that was going to be at $2 million. And I might say, Steve alluded to the fact that some of the capital items are being moved. So the capital spend was at $2.2 million for fiscal year 18. And it looks like it's dropping down to $2 million, but we moved roughly
$400,000. So it's actually going up by about 8%.
So it's actually going up. So if you do apples to apples comparison, we're going from 2.2 million up to 2.4 million on capital, but just 400,000 is being pushed over to the DPW side of the ledger. Our debt service, again, this is our mortgages that we've been talking about. 5.6 million is being spent there. Our trash collection, refuse, is at 1.8 million, which is roughly the same as it was for fiscal year 18. Roads and sidewalks is at 600,000. So there's a difference here. The Finance Committee decided that Steve and the selectmen, the councilors, were being too cheap on our roads and sidewalks. So when you look at that article when it comes up on Monday, The motion will be for one value, which is 450,000, I think.
350.
350?
Yeah.
And the Finance Committee wants us to spend more on roads and sidewalks. So we're going to be asking for 600,000.
Well, I hit a pothole last week, so my view has changed. No.
Did you lose a tire?
Yes, I did. I'm just kidding, though.
But that's why there's an asterisk there, because there is a difference between the counselors and Steve's recommendation in the motion. And when I get up, I'm going to request an amendment to that motion to increase it to 600,000. But you'll see the details at town meeting. Radios. This is important for the DPW. We have a $900,000 request for radio replacements. Our overlay fund, this is for abatements of taxes. $600,000 will be spent there. And then state and county, we have to spend $1.3 million there. They assessed, both the state and the county assessed the town for the services that they provide that we're supposed to pay for. I think it's probably the way to put it. So the articles add up to about $12.8 million.
And for that state and county assessment, probably half of it is the MBTA fee, having the train stop twice in Wakefield, come through Wakefield. And the other big portion of that is the charter school coverage that is charged back to the cities and towns. And we have no real say in that. It's just,
yeah, here's your bill.
Here's your bill. We took it off what we were going to give you.
Yeah.
We don't even pay it. They just don't give it. They take it off.
They are going to hit us.
Yeah.
So if we compare fiscal year 18 to 19, our total tax levy is expected to increase at $2.7 million, roughly 4%. And where that's going, salaries at $2.5 million, retirement's going up about $300,000, healthcare is about $300,000, capital on a net basis is $140,000, Medicare is going up $27,000, and vocational schools is going up $44,000. The state and county assessments actually go down by $90,000. Of course, the state aid went down, so I think we have a small net positive there. And then our articles actually total something a little bit less than $44,000 as a reduction. And then finally, the departments in total will increase about $4 million, or 5.3% from one year to the next. Capital. So a little bit more about the $2 million spend on capital. We lease a number of items, and including a number of computers and computer equipment. So that's the IT line, and that's so taking care of those prior leases that we've already entered into is going to cost us about $444,000.
And a big part of that was when you look back to 5 years ago, 5+ years ago, there hadn't been anything spent on IT at all. And think how important that is in how we teach our children, how we manage our work every day, how we talk to police officers, fire officers in the field. So we had to do what we call the forklift upgrade. We couldn't do it all out of cash, so we did actually do some leases. That number is actually coming down a little bit over time, which is nice. But we still have to pay it, and we knew that. We knew that going forward, that was going to be part of our IT capital spend. So,
yeah, I think of those leases as being this way to smooth out the spend, not take it all in one shot as a hit. And I think on the fleet side, that 250 is down quite a bit from where it was a couple years ago by a long shot. So, and by fleet and facilities, it's basically, if we DPW dump truck or something like that, we do it on a lease basis. Fleet purchases straight up is at $623,000. This includes things like three police cruisers.
We're on a replacement schedule with police cruisers. These run 24/7, as you can imagine. Again, when we were back in those horrible years, we weren't replacing police cruisers. They were breaking down. They were costing more to maintain. So we actually got on a schedule and budgeted for it. So we budgeted that on a schedule to handle that going forward. Some of the other highlights that we're replacing, we have a 1998 Vermeer chipper. that we're replacing. 1998, we got a pretty good bang for our buck out of
Yeah,
that.
that doesn't owe us a thing.
It doesn't owe us a thing. And you think about with all of these storms we're getting, how crucial that is. And we have, some dump trucks that are, 2000, 2002. We have a 1985 compressor that's still in service we're replacing. So a lot of these items that need to be replaced in our fleet so we can service the community.
I would like to see that 1970 rototiller.
Yes, still being used.
It's still working.
Yeah.
Those certain things just don't die. They keep chugging along. But we have, in here also have like dump trucks, plows, sanders. We have a lawnmower replacement. So things that we're using for maintaining our parks and our fields, the cemetery, we need those, that type of equipment.
That lawnmower was also a 1998 lawnmower, so we got a pretty good service out of that.
For facilities, basically it's the buildings. And we've got work going on at the library, the high school, the Galvin needs a little bit of work, Greenwood, the Doyle, the Woodville, the Ewell, Civic Center. I mean, it's all of our buildings. So we've got $447,000 devoted to keeping our buildings in tip-top shape. Roads, $70,000 on roads, fields, parks, and cemeteries, another $70,000. Some miscellaneous items at $75,000. Some IT purchases at $60,000, a much more manageable number at $60,000. All in, it turns into $2 million. Our water and sewer enterprise accounts also need equipment, for example, trucks. And so we've got some spend for both the water and sewer, $113,000 and $169,000.
And also some environmental work and systems work there too that we need to do.
Yeah, they have a compressor, they need a generator, odor control. There's a number of items in the water and sewer capital projects. So in total, if you will, fiscal year 19, we're looking to spend $95.161 million. We were at $90,605,000 for fiscal year 18, the current year. So roughly an increase of $4.5 million, or a 5% increase over the previous year. Our revenue is projected to be at $93.7 million. The difference of $1.5 million we're taking from free cash to cover that. By the way, we do expect this year, fiscal year 18, our free cash is going to come in significantly higher than where we are right now.
We're about seven and a quarter right now, so we will be adding to that.
Yeah, it'll go up to probably somewhere in the neighborhood of between 8 and 9 million. So we do expect at the end of this current fiscal year that we'll have plenty of free cash to handle the shortfall in the revenue to our budget. Some of our challenges. So we think about going forward. We really need to focus on various things. For example, the building and field maintenance. We're really doing a lot and have been doing a lot on energy control, trying to save as much cost on energy as possible. We also know that our roads and sidewalks in a few fields need help. Hence, the Finance Committee asking for more spend on roads and sidewalks. And I think anybody who drives around town will know in an instant that our roads and sidewalks need some real help. Stormwater is a big, big issue, and we've been working on that over the years, but we need to keep focused on it and keep moving to fix that. The high school had a lot of discussion, a lot of talk. We know we need to work on that. And then we know that we have capital projects over the coming years that from 20 to 23 is actually going to total $56 million. Well, we're not going to spend $56 million, but we know what the projects are. We know that they're out there. One that I hadn't really focused on was the Mill River. That's like $11 million for that. So there's some big projects that we know that we've been putting on the back burner that at some point we need to address. So that's going to be a challenge for the future. But we also have opportunities. For example, the power line that's got a lot of discussion this winter, we expect that will be put in play. We're expecting tax revenue of about $1.5 million just from that power line. and we expect it to start probably in fiscal year '20. We may get a little piece of it in '19, but I'm not counting it till '20. Another item on the mortgage list is the last Dolbear payment on the bond is $51,000, and that goes away in 2021. So there's a savings on a debt service fund. The last Woodville bond of $565,000 goes away in 2022. The last senior center bond is paid in '21, so that's gone in '22. And the last of public safety bonds, $600,000 goes away in '22. So in 2023, we'll have significant savings. So we add it all up, we'll have a reduction of roughly $1.3 million that we can use for other capital projects. That'll help. And I think you've already got some of that money spent, don't you?
Well, public safety building is going to take some of it. We also need to look at, really seriously look at the DPW garage,
Oh, the garage,
which
yes.
needs a lot of,
North Avenue Garage needs
a
help.
lot of help.
And then the other thing I do is I try to do a forecast, and I'm looking at the various budgets. I apply percentages I think is going to happen to revenue. I look at expenses, and this chart, although it could use some labels at the top, on the left-hand side is the expend. So we're at 95.1 million for 2019. I expect income 95.16, a net savings, if you will, or net increase that goes into free cash of $816,000. And then you can see going forward, especially in 2021, where we expect the Eversource to kick in. Now, if we keep our eyes on the budget and don't get too crazy, we expect to have some budget surpluses going forward that we can use for other additional capital projects and so forth. And then in the far right is just the percentage increases from one year to the next. And with that, I don't know if anybody has anything else to say, but we can turn it over. We have some audience members here. And if anybody would like have any questions for us, we're happy to entertain those. So,
And please come up to the microphone if you
Yes.
do, and state your name, just so we know, and we'll take it from there. Absolutely.
sure.
Well, pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you for your service to the town, all three of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Seems like you were just installed.
Tell me about it.
So I didn't see you go.
But I have been here for 32 years, so all told.
That's right. Well, I have now that we are semi-secure in our finances, I'm here to help you spend it with some suggestions. I was particularly interested in the fact that Vernon Street, either end of Vernon Street, needed work, especially the part near 128, where if you go to Linfield, you see this pristine road that they've recently done in the past couple of years. And of course, Wakefield, I wouldn't say it looks like Beirut, but it's certainly rough. That would be hyperbole, but it's, I feel every bump going down that road. And I thought the part would be from 128 to Lowell Street, and the other end would be from Salem Street to Water Street. That was one issue. The other issue would be, since we're commemorating Cyrus Wakefield on the 4th of July this year, it would be nice to have the road resurfaced, particularly the sidewalks, at least on one side of the street, depending on the budget, to complete it. It's probably half done now. There's some repairs to some of the concrete of the completed side, but that would be, I thought, a wonderful thing to do, since we had it was the grandson of Cyrus Wakefield, gave his gratitude to Wakefield for commemorating on the 4th of July.
You were speaking Wakefield Avenue. Correct?
Wakefield Avenue.
Right.
Yes, this would be Wakefield Avenue. Also, Cyrus Street, we have a yellow curve pointing up Cyrus Street in front of the Shaw's Market at the lights there. And I'd love to see that disappear, as opposed to making Cyrus Street a one-way street, so that we don't encourage people to take that as a cutoff road. That was also the playground at Nacella Playground. I thought the playground area where the children swings are in that area should be enlarged and a fence put around it so that there would be safety from these foul balls, now that they have really done a tremendous job there down at Nacella. But I thought the kids should be secured within that fenced-in area and seats put inside for the parents to sit down and observe their children. And one area of that field would be the back diamond, and back of the back diamond there. I don't know, and that's behind the fence, and I don't know who owns the property. It could be Wakefield Cement. And I think that's the Mill River that goes by there. So when they were dumping there, they had to stop, probably because of the river. But there's a little area there that would be nice for a picnic area. And in fact, if you widen the entrance, there's there's no gate on it, but you can go in there. It would be a wonderful picnic area. If it was widened, you could probably get wood chips. I'm sure these people that cut trees down would probably love to be able to dump their wood chips in there. And that would have to be qualified chips. In other words, we don't want them chipping poison ivy vines and that sort of thing. So there may be some kind of a health issue there. But, and it might be nice to secure the fence with a gate so that this other issue that we have is the homeless people have been making a home in the woods and back there. And right now, the town had cleaned up that area a bit, which was nice, but I was hoping that they would remove all the limbs. But what happened was they piled them up, and the homeless people put their tents there. Now, they're homeless, and although it was mentioned to me they're harmless, and that remains to be seen. They're harmless till something happens. And what happened now that he's disappeared, he's accumulated all this trash in back there. He must have collected every bottle in Wakefield. And there's a pile of trash. There's 3 or 4 carriages from the Shaw's Market back there with bottles in it, and that sort of thing. So the area should be cleaned up and completely, and at least, even if it's not able to be a picnic area. But I thought it would be nice if, you know, they came down to a baseball game and said they could picnic there, and be nice. Well, thank you. That's
Why don't I see if I can answer
you.
these? I'll answer as many as I can. I will look into with the DPW director on Cyrus Ave, on Cyrus Street and Wakefield Ave, particularly regarding the sidewalks, and see where that is on our paving schedule and see what we can do. I don't know if there's utility work that needs to be done there or not offhand, but I will check on it. I will say that oftentimes when you see a street that has sidewalks and then you see grass and then maybe you see sidewalks again, what happened years ago is that the people that owned that house where the grass was didn't want the sidewalk. So it wasn't put in. So that some of that is kind of legacy things that are happening too. And even now when we go out and talk to people about putting in sidewalks, Sometimes half of them say they don't want it, they like the grass, and so there's those dynamics too, we need to work it out. As far as Vernon Street is concerned, I think you probably have maybe seen some curbing work being done from Water to Salem. So that portion is going to be done probably this year, repaved and what have you. From Salem to the Linfield line, past Lowell Street, there's still some gas utility work that needs to be done. That is supposed to be done in the next year or two. When that's done, then that'll be paved, because we're not going to pave and then have gas work come in and be done. So it does have that dynamic too. We try to work that schedule out, because we don't want anybody to go into that road for any utility work at all. Once we're done.
And we have a moratorium.
And we have a moratorium unless there's an emergency.
Yeah.
So what happens is happened with Nahan Street a few years ago. We went and we paved it, all of a sudden there was a gas emergency. So at that, and that kind of, I know the DPW director, Mr. Stinson, was very upset about that and called me up on the phone. So we will, that's the issue there. Nacella Playground, I will also look into that. We have been doing kind of a playground every year. I know we did, a couple of years ago, we did JJ Round. I will on that. A lot of work has been done on the cellar, as you know, to get it ready for fencing. As far as that area behind the fence, I'll take a walk over there and then look at it. I'm not sure if that's our land, or it could be, you mentioned the cement company, because we did get on them to clean that up. And you said it was cleaned up nice, so maybe they did get to it. So
They did, they just left the branches
But
in a
I think
pile.
we'll look at that whole thing. But I do appreciate you coming out and asking us the
I think
questions.
generally, when there's a river involved,
Yeah.
usually it's 15 feet from the center of the stream, left and right, generally. I don't know what it is here, but it's a nice area. It could be utilized if we have access to it, and we own it.
Right, and there's a cement company, and then there is other town land that goes down there too, so we'll have to
Yeah.
kind of see where that is.
Also, I just wanted to mention, I hope the bike path,
Yeah.
that's going to be a boom, I'll
Well,
tell you.
that's one of the articles at town meeting, so I hope you come. I forget what article that is, 18, 19, 20, in that area, so.
Well, it's a multi-dwelling area that,
Yeah.
the east side of the railroad tracks there. And these are potential homeowners in Wakefield. I know my tenants always look in Wakefield first when they're going to buy homes. And so I'm sure that other areas where there are multi-dwellings, they look at Wakefield first, where it's feasible for them. And the bike path would be just a wonderful
I think
addition
we
to
all agree that it would.
Wakefield.
It's going to start at the right across the street from the Galvin, and hopefully go all the way through Linfield, almost all the way to the PBD line.
Terrific, be
So it will be
terrific.
nice.
Thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you very much for coming.
Appreciate it. Any other questions? You have one? Sure.
It's Mike Perlman from 23 King Street.
Welcome.
Thanks. It's been quite a while since I think I went to the first one, public one in one of the auditoriums. It was a packed house, I remember. It's been a while that I've gone to a lot of these. I just got a few questions. I didn't really come with anything prepared questions, but just a few things that came to mind during your presentation. First one's really just a quick, simple one, just for my own edification and others. But as far as revenue goes in Wakefield, a lot of people talk about buying local and trying to buy in Wakefield. Does some little piece of everything we buy in Wakefield, including gasoline, I go to Cumberland Farms and get my 99-cent coffee.
That does.
I used to go to Reading across
Yeah.
the Rotary when they built the one in Wakefield. I get that, my gas, right there. It's in my neighborhood. Do we actually get a little piece of something for going to the one in Wakefield rather than the one in
We
Reading,
do.
for example?
Yeah, we do get a little, we talked about a lot about the hotel and meals taxes, but the fact that we support, and I'm obviously a big supporter of local businesses, helps us, because one of the things that we receive from them is their property taxes and equipment. We get that, and so as long as Wakefield businesses thrive, the town gets a piece of that revenue.
In their real estate taxes.
In the real,
But any other tax that you pay at the point of service, so when you get your coffee at Cumberland Farms, you probably pay 5 cents meals tax. We do get a portion of that. The town does.
Okay, gasoline?
Gasoline, we do not.
Yeah, we don't
No.
get that.
Not directly.
Yeah, so
Okay.
yes, support your local
Support, yeah.
business.
All right.
And you're also, people are employed, that maybe they're going to go down and buy a sandwich somewhere else, or, and then, so there's that whole multiplier effect that it all helps out, so.
Yeah, in addition to just trying to keep our local businesses in business
Absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
keep Main Street filled with storefronts. All right, so for, I guess this is probably for Dr. Smith. I know you're on your way to retirement soon. Good luck with that.
Thank you very much.
So it's probably more for your predecessor, I mean, for your successor, but I guess when would you expect, I guess, to propose a building project for this building, for the Wakefield Memorial High School, to the state again, with reasonable expectation of acceptance? And I guess the second part of that is, do we sort of have inside contacts or people we work with within the, I don't know the entities, at Mass Building, School Building?
MSBA, Mass School Building Authority.
School Building
Yeah.
Authority, that sort of can help advise us when we might be well-positioned to get funding, because I know we tried a couple times and
Sure,
didn't
absolutely.
make the cut.
So we have submitted a statement of interest again this year. We submitted one last year. The last 2 years have been the most robust statement of interest packets that we've submitted since the town had the Permanent Building Committee brought in, did a feasibility study, kind of a pre-feasibility study, and what that did was it really informed a really robust statement of interest. So the last two that we've submitted have been, really a great product, if you will. We were not, brought in with, we did not receive the partnership last in FY17. We'll still be waiting to hear how things go this year. We probably won't know until the fall. But in terms of reasonable expectation, so right now, the Wakefield High School is on what's called accreditation warning. Meaning that it's been a very long time that some of these problems have existed, like the HVAC systems, the roof on the building, our science labs are really outdated. And our next accreditation on the 10-year cycle comes up in 2021. So actually our new principal in the coming year will be attending a series of meetings that begin to prepare Wakefield High School to go through accreditation again. And then in FY20, they will do what's called a self-assessment. It's a whole year-long process. And then the accreditation committee will come in that fall of FY 2021. So we're really coming up on a very important point. That helps us a little bit in that the MSBA rates schools on a scale of 4 kind of being in the worst condition, and 1 being in the best condition. There were very few 4s on this year's list when we did not get in, and those schools mostly had serious safety issues. We do not really have safety issues at Wakefield Memorial High School, but we did get a 3. And that's actually a good thing for us because there weren't all that many 3s either. So there were lots of 2s, lots of 1s. So by getting a 3, and I think largely we received that rating because we're on the accreditation warning status, and that's really kind of the very next thing after the safety issue. So it's really my hope. I mean, I talk directly with the MSBA. Unfortunately, having any inside contacts doesn't really help you. But in talking with them, I think they're very, very aware and cognizant of the accreditation issue. And so I'm really hoping, that this will happen very soon for us. It really needs to happen soon for us. And they know that. So I don't know if you
Right,
have
I know,
anything to add,
we had a site visit with the SBA last summer, last
Yeah,
year.
about a year ago,
About
yeah.
a year ago. So they did come through. Jack McCarthy, the director there, came through. So they are aware of where we are. They are also, I think, very pleased with how the Galvin turned out and how the partnership worked with them. So there is that, you say, does it, I think it helps. I got to say it does help because they know that we have done a good job at the Galvin. The director was thrilled to come and speak at the grand opening of the Galvin, so to speak. So, you know, we try to go on all avenues. believe me.
On that site visit, that's called a senior site study, and only a small percentage of schools receive that opportunity. So that shows that we're nearing
We're
that
getting closer,
place. They were really impressed with a few things. They were very impressed with our strategy that I mentioned earlier, the strategic action plan for the school. They were very impressed with the partnership. You know, our town administrator was there. There was this clear collaboration between the town and schools, like a lot of energy around it. They were very impressed with a lot of the work that the town has done, that the community has invested in, like the Savings Bank Theater at Wakefield Memorial High School, the beautiful fields, you know, where the community has been able to.
Field house
The field
upgrade.
house upgrade, you know, they were very impressed with that. And so in addition to the Galvin, those things really look well for us.
So is this statement of interest, is that what?
It's in.
Is that,
Yeah.
is that something that essentially since I think we had to pay for a whole study to basically have a full plan in place to be able to be eligible to apply for that. Since we've done that, pending, I guess, updates for how costs change over time, is the statement of interest something that you'd probably just do each year until we
Yeah,
get
it's
funding?
really,
Just-
the statement of interest this year is very much the same as the one we
Copy-paste.
submitted last year, just with a few little tweaks of things that might have changed a bit, but it really informed by that feasibility study. That'll carry us through. That was a kind of an intensive study to really help inform the details that
Right.
the MSBA is looking for. That in itself really signals a commitment by the town, that the town was willing to do this pre-feasibility study because this was so very
And
important.
we funded
to us.
that ourselves.
That's right.
There was no state money for that, so.
Right. Okay, thank you. I guess one question relating to to our bonds and debt. Just curious, would you consider this, I guess, is there some incentive for us to make larger capital expenditures, capital projects sooner rather than later, given the rising interest rate environment that we're still getting? We still have a AAA rating, but we also are getting reasonably low rates historically, which may not be the case 5 years down the road or 10 years or what have you.
Yeah, I would say that the need is there certainly right now in a number of projects, including the public safety building that's going to be on the town meeting floor Monday night. That is a consideration in that, not only the rising interest rates, but the rising cost of everything, the rising cost of steel, things like that. In fact, when we project out, we actually have our architects give us a kind of a projection. Like if you do it this year, it's X. If you do it next year, it's X plus. And the year after that, it's X plus plus. So we're trying to do that now, you know, so we can take advantage of that. So yeah, that is part of our calculus.
Yeah, but, I mean, obviously, we need the revenue.
We need the revenue, and we need to make sure some of those others come down, so it's
Right,
like,
yeah, so that's-
it's a balancing act that we do.
Exactly.
We talk a lot about bonds, it's very exciting.
It's more to the point of if we are pretty certain we're going to need to do something that we're going to acquire more debt, that I'd rather pay it at
Lower
4%
interest
than
rates.
Lower rate,
6% or something
I'll
down the
agree.
road. If-
We all agree with that.
That's why
Everything else-
that's
everything
why
else
we're
being
really-
equal.
Really happy we got the AAA rating, because that lowered
Yeah.
our interest expense.
Yeah.
Right. And last one, this is sort of small, I'm not sure if this is the right venue, but just closer to home. Notice at least in my neighborhood, we have a lot of, we have the sidewalk median, we had a lot of flowering trees. Maybe it was a historical thing on there. But in the last year or two, especially this last few storms, and between storm damage and disease damage, we've lost a whole bunch of those. Is the sidewalk median trees, is that something that, replacing those, is that something that
Yeah,
we do?
we do
Is that
go
a
through and do as
Dennis
many as we
Fazio kind of
can a
thing?
year. It's in the budget.
Yeah.
Did you say King Street is
Yeah.
where you were? Okay. We'll have them look at that. Yeah, this was a very, some of those last few storms were really rough.
Yeah,
On
they're
our
really-
trees, yeah. So, but I will talk to our tree warden about that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. So with that, I think we have all the questions and answers. I would really like to thank the people who came in. I'd like to
Yeah.
thank Dr. Smith,
You as well.
Town Administrator.
Thank you.
Mr.
Thank you,
Mayo.
Dan.
Appreciate it. And for the audience out there, I really hope to see you Monday night for a town meeting and lend your voice to this whole process. So with that, have a good evening.
Thank you.